Can you hear me okay? We're good. So my name is Ellen Boya. I'm the founder of Women in Trucking Association, and I have the pleasure of moderating this panel with this tremendous wealth up here. So we're going to talk for about 45 minutes. In the last 15 minutes, we hope you will ask them lots of questions. But the title, in case you came in the wrong room, is Empowering Perspectives, Women Leading Growth, Understanding Teams, and Leveraging Data. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have each of them introduce themselves to start out so that you know who they are. So Katy, I'm going to start with you.
Sure. So I'm Katy Hiatt, and I am owner and founder of 11 Logistics. We're a freight brokerage company. I also own a second business that I started 13 years ago, and I've been running, that's why we started 11 Logistics. I had a little thing written out, but that's who I am. If you guys have more questions, I'm happy to tell you a little bit more. I'm a mom.
But I want you to tell the 11 story. Yeah, I do. I'm sorry. She shared something with me, and I think you're going to find it pretty profound.
So you guys, 11 Logistics, my husband and I had decided to start a freight company because we could not get in touch with the drivers that were delivering our products. And it was so frustrating to me. So we decided to start this freight company. We were trying to decide what we wanted to call it and who we wanted to be. So my husband's grandfather was a super important role model in his life. He didn't have a father figure. So he was a World War II veteran, and he used to tell my husband and all of his cousins whenever they needed something or they were being nosy or they wanted something, he'd say, "Don't you worry, 1111, I got you covered." And so 1111 was like their thing, right? So we decided on 11 Logistics, and Jan brought it to my attention today that today is 11/11 and Veterans Day, so it gives me the chill bumps.
Me too.
One last thing, Dallas was his name, and we're in Dallas, Texas, so it's just crazy. And his last name is Hiatt, as well as mine. She was saying it should have been at the Hiatt. But that's the little story of 11
That's pretty amazing, isn't it? Pretty
Thank
cool.
you, Ellen. Thank you.
Amazing. Well,
Jenna?
thank you, Katy, for sharing that with us. My name is Jenna Armato. I'm the CEO of Armato and Associates, which is a training and development company. And so my team and I work with teams and organizations in leadership development and effective communications. And a little bit of what kind of led me to do the work that I'm doing, I spent about 20 years in corporate marketing and advertising. And throughout my career, I kept gaining more responsibility to lead people, and I kept asking for leadership training. And I kept hearing things like, "You'll figure it out. You're doing fine. Just keep going." And I wanted more than that. I was kind of craving more than that. And so I started exploring leadership development just purely for my own purposes. And the more I did that, the more that I talked to peers and people in other industries that were having similar challenges. And so 6 years ago, I transitioned out of my corporate career and launched the training and development company, and here we are. It's a little bit about me.
Great. Jan Degallier, I am the CFO of 11 Logistics. I've had the privilege of working with Katy and the 11 Logistics team for the past 2 years. And so it's my second year at Women in Trucking, so I'm just really honored to be here. And I am also the founder of my firm. It's a leadership company as well called Degallier Leadership Solutions. And my focus is to help businesses and leaders up-level their leadership by knowing their numbers and knowing the story of their numbers. And by part, a lot of what the work I've been doing with Katy and the 11 Logistics team inspired me to write a book. So I just released a book about 6 weeks ago called Rise Above Your Business, Knowing the Story of Your Numbers. And so it's just an honor to be here. Thank you so much.
And she's a best-selling author. It went straight to the top of her category, so.
I told you it's a pretty jam-packed panel. Jane, are you okay if I start with you, since we kind of ended with you on introductions? And I'm going to ask questions, and I want the other two to jump in if you feel that you want to add something. But Jane, I'm going to start with you. In your experience, how can women leaders build a culture of accountability in their teams while keeping a balance between empathy and getting results?
Yeah, I think, accountability is something that we all know is important. And so just to bring a little bit of perspective of what accountability is, can you hear it okay? We'll just share back and forth if we need to. Okay, perfect. So if you think about it, when an environment lacks accountability, it starts with leadership. It starts with, if you are a leader, the accountability starts with you. So if there's a lack of accountability with yourself, you're probably not doing what you're supposed to do when you're supposed to do it. If a whole environment, if the culture does not support accountability, there's a lot of team members that are working, but they're not necessarily doing what they're supposed to do when they're supposed to do it. So that's in general kind of what I mean. And so if you think about it, that type of environment breeds a lot of lack of clarity. There's not a lot of clarity at all in those environments. So what I really like to talk about is we try to compartmentalize. Any business has numbers, financials. That's my background. I like to talk about that. But what we do every day can often not be combined with what we're seeing with the numbers. So if we're not driven by what's objective data, if we're not making decisions by what's the objective data, we're probably making decisions by emotions. And so the point I want to bring together here, and the basis, I think, of your question, Ellen, is how do we bring that together? How do we build that culture of accountability and do both? Because it's not mutually exclusive. And so, first of all, you need to have clear expectations. And so when you can balance that out and not completely rely on emotions, because emotions aren't bad. We need to have emotions. We need to be passionate about what we do. Otherwise, why are we doing what we're doing? But the problem comes into play is when we have, if we rely on the emotions alone to drive our decisions. So when we can bring in more clarity with having purposeful, objective data and structuring it in a way that it helps further the organization as a whole, that can bring a balance. And it really can lead to a culture of trust, a culture of empathy. It's really cool how that comes into play. And I've seen it at 11 Logistics, which having that strong mission, that strong vision, and that's what Katy talked about, that really drives it forward. And so when you have that, you have a really good foundation.
Yeah, Jan's brought a way of showing us how accountability is so important, but everyone owning a number. And, depending on where you are in an organization, we've found that you can kind of assign whatever it might be, like admin, accounting, finance, sales, marketing. Some of those areas we thought, well, how do you have a number for this? This isn't even, operations, whatever. And what Jan's brought to us is that, which I didn't realize, the motivation factor of everyone understanding what they're responsible for, accountability, but also being able to see results as the team. So everyone's participating their number in a full circle. You come together more, and I don't know, you just see the team get really motivated and more driven by having that accountability. So. Yeah, and a lot less emotion, a lot less like, well, that was her fault or that was his fault or all the things that we like to do in the blame game. Everyone can own their number and really feel proud about it and be held accountable to it, including the leadership team as well as all the way down to everyone, I guess.
Is that a little intimidating, hiring someone who says management has to set clear expectations when you're management?
Yeah, and holding me accountable.
Right.
And I work with my husband, so.
Jenna, did you
it goes home with you.
Yeah, well, I think that comes back to kind of the theme of the conversation, which is empowering perspectives. And I think, it's interesting because when you take a look at the just pure data, which can kind of be like static and rigid, right? But when you can take a look at it from a leadership perspective, which is exactly what Jan was just describing to us, really basically says, look, I care about my team, I care about my organization, I want to empower people in this way where they have clarity and understanding. So I think that's really where kind of the leadership aspect of the data comes into play.
Right.
Yeah.
Excellent. Okay, Jenna, this one's for you.
Sure.
What are some of the key factors to consider when it comes to understanding team members and the people we work with?
Sure. Yeah, great question. So I think, there are a few things for consideration. The first piece, and I think it's a great piece to start with anything, is really understanding the why. Asking yourself as a leader, asking yourself in your role, why is it important to me to get to know the people around me, the people that I'm working with? And then asking, okay, well, what value does that bring to the organization? So if I know the people that I'm working with, why is that important to me, and how does that help the organization? And so you might say, well, it's important to me because when I'm working with someone, I want to be really invested. I want us to be invested in one another so that we can really work well together to produce some amazing results together. Fantastic. That's your answer, right? Well, what value does that bring to an organization? Well, if you really know people, if you're really connected, if you're working in synergy, increases time effectiveness, increases productivity, increases engagement, increases retention, right? So those are some of the ways that would add value to the organization. And then after you start with that why foundation, I think there are 3 lenses to kind of look through when you're getting to know your team. I think certainly first would be the individual, really getting to know each person as an individual and who they are. What are they passionate about outside of work? What's their family life? What excites them outside of work? Who are they as a person? And I think the second lens to look through would be from a communication perspective. Really understanding, how does this person I'm interacting with, or how does my team, how do they communicate? What's their personal individual communication style? And then the third piece would be understanding generational context and understanding. This is the first time in history we've got 5 generations in the workforce, understanding and working together, understanding one another and working together. And there's some great value that we can gain from that generational context. And so each one of those is kind of like a zoom out, right? So getting to know the person as a person, getting to know how they communicate, and then getting to know and understand that generational context. What is it about the way that they have grown up and entered the workforce that shapes their thinking, that drives their day-to-day operational kind of work style, if you will. So
I'm going to follow up with you on the why, though, because when you're telling them, here's the why, do you paint it as a vision? Do you paint it as a future? How do you explain that why?
Yeah, I think the why is why is it important to me? So, for example, I would just kind of take a look at me and my business and kind of maybe the relationship, that we have, right? And so, if I'm serving Katy, if I'm working with Katy, well, I want to really get to know Katy, because the more I get to know Katy, the more deeply I can serve her, right? When I really understand her, I can understand and serve the whole capacity of what it is that she wants to do, right? Rather than operating kind of like a silo. I don't know if that.
Oh, no, that's,
I
just threw that one at you. And Katy, did you have it? Katy?
Yeah. So, both my companies are run really, I guess, based on core values. For us, building strong relationships, number one. And all people matter is a big one for us as well. But what Jenna's saying too, when you're building a strong relationship, you have to know, number one, yourself. What are you reacting to? What's the emotional side that Jan is talking about? So, I know some of this, we talk about working in a male-dominated industry and all of those things. Well, some of us might have belief systems that we set up a long time ago. And I don't know if you guys were at the presentation this morning, but she talked a little bit about how our brain's wired. And so for me, when I was developing as a leader in business, I first learned, I think I was at a conference, and they were like, you have to know yourself to grow yourself. And I was like, well, I'm learning accounting and marketing and all these skills, right? But that hit me like a brick. And I had to start doing the hard work of understanding how I react to things, what my beliefs, what kind of fuel my actions. For example, if I'm an I and a D. So, sorry, you guys, I use DISC. We use DISC for our teams. I'm talkative, one. And D, very decisive, quick to make decisions, and direct. I can be very direct, especially under stress. I have people on my team that are C's and S's, and they won't make a quick decision. They need to take time. They need all the information behind the decision before they can. So you can imagine in a workplace when those two come together and you're like, God, just tell me already, we got to get this done. We're moving ahead. And they're like, oh, well, she's taking 3 days. She's still researching. And you're just like, So Jenna and Jan both have helped me learn and grow on how not only to like learn myself better and understand my styles, but also other people that I work with and help me grow my team in that way. Because the C and the S that I am not brings so much to the table that I do not. And I think that's so important in teams, whether you're leading or whether you're an employee or whatever it is that you're doing. It's so important to understand yourself first and then also learn how others function and work. And then when you go out to do sales, I tell my sales team all the time, like, if you can start to recognize how people function or what their triggers are emotionally, all of those things will play into it, and you'll be able to have better conversations, grow the relationship in a stronger way, to build trust. And I think that's one of the biggest keys to being successful, really.
I'm going to just add one more thing, too, that as I think about the why and really understanding who you are, who your team is, the other kind of more practical application or foundational application of this, if you think of how you design the org chart of your system or of your organization, if you are a leader, or if you're working in a business and you think about the org chart, that's really, really important. And sometimes, it can maybe be overlooked sometimes, or you might not understand the importance, but having the understanding of why a certain how certain positions roll up within an organization, that defines accountability, and that's very important. Another aspect is the roles and really clear definitions within those roles. When you can understand the why behind the person, and if you can understand their personalities and what they enjoy, you can really put people in the right roles. Maybe they didn't apply for that role, but you might understand that person and really know what drives them and place them in the right place. And that's a win-win. That's a win-win for the person themselves, and that's a win-win for the company.
And, I would just kind of wrap this up with, maybe the answer to the question in terms of, why is it important to me to really get to know my team members? Maybe one of the answers is because that's what they need from me. Because that's what they need from me and in me as a leader. Yeah.
So Katy, this one's for you. What are 2 key factors in your success today?
Sure, I've already kind of touched on that, but I think the biggest thing is learning that I needed to understand myself and really do some personal development. Like I said at first, I thought I was gonna learn how to be a leader and all these different skill sets and that I needed in business classes, and the more I did that, the more I started finding out that you really have to understand yourself, personal development and growth. And then also, I think one of the biggest things was, it was Darren Hardy. I think I was listening to him and he said, where you are right now, like this very moment, is a compilation of the choices you have made. And that, I was like, what? Like everything in my life is because of what I've decided to do and the choices I've made. I think I didn't understand that. I was like, oh, well, it's not my husband's fault that I'm here, or it's my parents' fault, or the professor I had in college, whatever. So taking ownership of me and then really starting to understand, like I was just talking about. And then the second thing is understanding, a book that I love is The Who, Not How. But understanding, for me as a leader, that I can't do everything. I never will be able to, and I'm not going to be good at a lot of things. So finding that right who, which is why Jan and Jenna are sitting here beside me, and Adriana, my team member, they are so good at what I'm not, but understanding that I don't have to learn everything and I don't have to figure it all out myself, that if I can surround myself with the right people, I'm going to be so much better off. And I feel like the conversations going in that direction, it's so much about understanding people and understanding yourself.
Jenna, this one's for you. You talked about 4 generations that we have in the business place today. So what are some of the biggest gaps you're seeing in multi-generational team? And give our listeners 1 or 2 strategies.
Yep, absolutely. So this is the first time in history that there are 5 generations spanning the workforce. We've got builders, which are the eldest generation in the workforce. Builders grew up during the Great Depression and World War II. People usually give me that question. They're like, are you sure there are builders in the workplace? Yes, they make up 2% of the workforce population. Then we've got baby boomers. Baby boomers grew up completely differently from builders. They grew up during a time of exploration and expansion and prosperity. And baby boomers kind of entered the workforce likely with some competition. At that point in history, that was the largest generation that existed. So they probably had some competition. And they entered the workforce at a time where there was a very clear hierarchical structure. There was a very much, the leadership style was very much of a because I said so type of leadership style. That was kind of the style of the time. And then we've got Gen Xers. And Gen Xers grew up, many of you might know, as latchkey kids, who came home at the end of the day. Mom and dad were working because, there were more opportunities for women in the workforce. So, both parents were working outside of the home more regularly. So latchkey kids came home at the end of the day, took care of themselves while mom and dad were working. Mom and dad came home and said, hey, we want some quiet time. Go ahead outside and play. So Gen X grew up being very independent and resilient, but seeing mom and dad very much focused on work, right? And Gen X said, well, wait a second. I think I might want some balance between family and work. And they sort of bring those conversations to the workplace, right? And then you've got millennials. Millennials were the first generation to start to have access to technology while they were growing up. Millennials in the workplace like to ask a lot of why-type questions. They're searching for meaning and purpose, not just in their role in the work that they're doing, but how those why-type questions are going to help drive innovation and advancement. And then we've got Gen Z, a new, beautiful, brilliant generation that has entered the workforce. Gen Z has never known a world without technology. This is the only generation to date that has had access to technology from the time of birth. And they're a generation that has grown up in the aftermath of 9/11 and during a global pandemic, okay? So when we talk about gaps that exist across those generations, there are lots of gaps. The biggest one that I've seen in the work that I do is between Gen Z, this new generation, and all of the others, for lots of different reasons. But one of the biggest reasons being their perspective as it relates to work is completely different from all of the others. All the other generations kind of grew up with the understanding of, you know what, I'm going to get an education or I'm going to get hands-on experience, I'm going to get a job, and then all the things kind of revolve around the job. My friends, my family, my fun, work is the central focus point. Gen Z flips the script, and Gen Z says, my health, my well-being, my happiness is the central focus point. Work is simply a means for me to do that, okay? Now, I'm not saying that either one of those is good. I'm not saying either one of those is bad. It just is, but here's where the gap comes in. The gap comes in because here's what that looks like in the workplace. If the working hours are 8 a.m. to 4 p.m., Gen Z is working 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. They are turning off notifications when they get home. They're not working over the weekends, right? Now, I say they. Keep in mind, I'm talking big, broad, okay? At the end of the day, the most important thing is to know your individuals as people, okay? End of the day. But that's what this looks like in the workplace, is that they have a different work style than every other generation. So that's creating some big gaps. And one of the biggest strategies that you can use to start to bridge any of the generational gaps is simply starting from the place of understanding. Really understanding why it is they do what they do, and then how to be able to engage and retain those people effectively. Because if you operate from a place of emotion or perception, you could say, well, this person is coming at 8, they're leaving at 4, they're not doing anything extra. They must not care about their job. They must not be motivated, right? But wrong answer. Gen Z is one of the hungriest, motivated generations that really want to grow and develop. So that's kind of the key, is coming back to that place of understanding. Let's understand each generation, what drives and motivates them, and how we can really work together effectively.
Either of you want to add on to that? Go ahead.
Yeah, I'll just add, what you just described with Gen Z, but it's all generations too. But people want clarity, and I believe, I've heard you talk about, Jenna, how Gen Z wants clarity. They're hungry for clarity. They're hungry for feedback. And when you can have a really good read on what's really going on, you can provide great feedback. So just kind of bringing that data, that balance of data into the equation is going to help you with the generational feedback. It kind of brings people to common ground, right? When you have everybody, doesn't matter what generation they are, if everyone's working towards the same goal, the same mission in the organization, and good clarity on how to get there, even that entry-level customer service person, if they know what they do every day and how that impacts the top level goals of the organization, that is really motivating.
Yeah, 100%. It's absolutely one of the things that many generations are looking for, and millennials as well. But really, clarity and purpose and understanding of their role. To your point, their role, how that role has an impact in the organization, and how that organization has an impact on the community or in the world at large. Kind of one quick example of clarity. I was working with an organization who brought me in. And this is a business who started out as a small business, grew really successfully, and said, Jenna, we need some help. We have never had a retention challenge before. This has never been an issue for us. We are not retaining Gen Z, and we just don't even know what to do. And so when we started kind of peeling back the layers, here's where the gap and the challenge was. They were hiring Gen Zers. Within the first 60 to 90 days, those folks were asking for advancement in compensation, in role, and this company was getting really frustrated. And so I asked the exec team, I said, okay, so what is your strategy for performance management and assessing performance and then providing compensation? They said, what do you mean, what's our strategy? We don't have a strategy for that. And I said, okay, well, how can you be frustrated if you're not creating the expectation on the upfront? So having that clarity of understanding, to your point, your structures, your processes, your systems, your data, and then being able to set expectations based on that creates a culture and opportunity for growth and advancement, I think. Yeah.
Yes, I love that. I did have, actually Adriana's here. She's one of my awesome favorite team members who's Gen Z. I think I gave her a bonus one time, and my husband and I just used to they're doing a great job. We love it. We can't give Jan any numbers, but she's doing amazing, and we love her. She's like, I gave her a bonus, and she was like, well, why? And I was like, we love you.
That's emotion, isn't it?
100%, which isn't all bad. It's great, right? I'm sure she loved it. However, it's very interesting in how you motivate the different generations. And so much, my husband's I literally had to mail a quote. Talk about what is the oldest generation?
Builders.
The builders. I think he must be a builder because he doesn't have a cell phone or a fax machine. He's like, I have to mail it. So anyway, and that's in the horticulture and tree farming industry. So it was really funny. But, sometimes we get so frustrated, and perspective is everything, right? We see the world through our own lens. And man, when you can start to understand that other people have a whole different lens, it just opens the world up for you. And I think opens the ability to be successful with people, because I don't think, even with all of the AI, there is no way to get out of working with people. And they are what truly, for my businesses, matter. That's why we're here. That's why I'm here. From the carriers, the growers, all of it, my teams, it's all the people, so you have to understand people, and I think that's where this is trending.
It's not about loads or freight.
Right.
It really is about people.
Yeah.
Jan, you kind of touched on this earlier, so I want you to elaborate. But what are some ways you balance the data-driven decisions with understanding team dynamics to support long-term growth? And I know you kind of touched on it, but elaborate on that.
Yeah. I would say there are, there's definitely tools and things you can bring into your workplace to help balance out the data. For example, with 11 Logistics, we very much rely on a scorecard story of what's happening sooner rather than later. Then you're not reacting to it. You can be proactive. You can put things into place ahead of time. And so a scorecard, something like that, is very, very powerful in terms of being able to have a strategy to balance out the data-driven decisions and being able to then bring in decisions around giving good feedback and being able to have empathy in knowing maybe if you see something going on, maybe somebody has something going on in their life and you didn't realize it. It can help raise the question. You can help understand what's going on. So there's so many elements to that. And just knowing that being really intentional about KPIs, so key performance indicators, if you haven't heard about that before, what you bring onto your scorecard, how often you're looking at it, there's a definite way you want to think about that before you start doing it. You just don't want to throw, if you Googled KPIs, you'd probably see a lot of articles that would say, the top 150 KPIs you should be looking at. I would say that's too many. We look at a handful, maybe like
for
10,
sure.
5 or 10, so.
Yeah. And I think what Jan's so amazing at is these understanding numbers and them telling a story. Like now the conversations come up of we're actually like rating customers, we're rating our vendors, we're seeing who's a good fit, and then that can all translate back to our core values and maybe why we shouldn't be working with them or why we should be working with them. So it kind of gives support even to the emotional side or to the people side of things on why are they not a good fit? Because we all need to make money, like 100%. But one of my core values is building strong relationships, and this rating system might tell us like that's not a good fit for our company because we are all about relationships and maybe they're not. So you start to see these stories. I don't know. For me, it's a surprise that Jan has come on board and you see patterns and things you can track where I never imagined that you could kind of put numbers to it. So that's been really fun for us, I think, and really helped.
So Katie, or did you have?
No, I was just going to say that I think that clarity, provides confidence. I mean, is that fair to say?
Oh, 100%.
Right? Eliminates the second guessing, the questioning, the doubt, and you're able to operate from a place of certainty and understanding.
Yeah,
right?
for
That's a
sure.
good point, yep.
Yeah, setting the expectations. So Katie, you talked a little bit about this, about learning things about yourself, but what was one of the most impactful changes you had to make within yourself
Sure.
to be a better leader?
Yeah, so, I was a people pleaser, and I also didn't want, I don't know why, I grew up like always wanting to I was fine with me being challenged. I would crawl through the mud up a mountain for 10 miles, and I was good with it. Now, if someone else had to do that, I couldn't watch it. Like, I was like, no, I'll do that. So I don't know where that comes from, and I need a psychologist in the room to tell me, but I always wanted to rescue people. I didn't want them to have to go through the hard stuff. So going from enabling to empowering, and also myself, like holding myself accountable and understanding where I need to grow and develop was a huge shift for me. But really learning to empower others and the gift of that is so good. I think I said, like, don't help someone cross the finish line if they haven't run the race. And I don't know, where we all are. We've all had struggle and hardships, and that's why we are who we are. Everyone in the audience has. So everyone sitting here understands where that got them and what they learned from it, right? And I have a friend that says you can either be victorious or you can be a victim, and the choice is yours. And isn't that so true? So you can, I think, failing forward, understanding that you're not going to be perfect, you're not going to get it right, but you just keep going and learn from what you've failed at or what you didn't do right is such a huge lesson to me, and it's really helped me grow my successes, understanding that, and the gift of accountability for others all day long. Like, I didn't realize until Jane came on board, like, why accountability is such a gift, and I see my team light up. Like, we've never had such good kind of tracking and accountability for people, and man, we are so motivated, and so just everyone's on board with our vision and our core values, and that's all stems back to this accountability, so.
And I think too, I mean, if you take a look back over the years and you kind of like track back, your intentionality in growing yourself as a leader, I'm sure you could absolutely correlate the business growth that you've seen.
Yes,
Based on the growth
100%.
the investment you've made in yourself to really get intentional at growing yourself
Right.
and then your teams and then the business, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'd say, you always hear stepping out of your comfort zone. Like, what is the quote? It's oh, now I can't find it. Oh, people will sacrifice what they want for what is familiar all the time, right? So many people won't do what's hard because they're comfortable. We're all comfortable, so we're not going to. When I started my first business, my husband was severely depressed, and I was pregnant with our second child. And I literally waddled into 8 banks and said, I'm going to start a company, I'm going to be the president, and I'm going to have a baby. Can you give me some money? And, out of the 8 banks I went to, no joke, and I got a few laughs and like, are you crazy? I got 3 yeses. And so I think understanding your limits, and I guess one of the things I want to say is don't wait till your husband's depressed and doesn't want to live and you're pregnant to make the decision to go do what you want to do. Get out there and do it, but it's uncomfortable, all day long uncomfortable. So I think everyone sitting here has been in that uncomfortable place, and they went through it and persevered, and that's what I want you guys to understand is it's not comfortable, but it's worth it.
And I want to add something about it's establishing your credibility. You were pregnant, and they just made an assumption about what your goals were
Yes.
for the near
Yes,
future.
yes.
But once you can establish that credibility and say, no, I mean what I say, and then and I'm just going to relate it back to women in trucking, the first year was the hardest because people are like, what? You're starting a nonprofit to get more women in the industry? Why? And so establishing that credibility and say, well, this is why we need more women in the industry, and these are ways that we all can do that. And you had to really
Yes.
make sure that people knew that you were walking the walk and not just talking the talk.
Right. Yeah. 100%. That action. Right. Yes.
So Jenna is the CEO of Armato and Associates, and they're a full-service training and development company. So this one's more about tools again, because you've got lots of great ideas. What are some tools or frameworks you recommend that can help people get a deeper understanding of their teams to drive that organizational growth?
Sure. Yeah, great question. So I would say this, we talked about, earlier on in our discussion, we talked about 3 different lenses to really get to know your team members, right? On an individual one-to-one level, their communication style, how they communicate and interact, and then that multi-generational context. And there are all kinds of team building questions and things you can implement in your staff meetings, and they're all fabulous. But I would say a game changer is this. If in your one-on-one meetings that you have with team members, if you can start out that meeting with, hey, you know what, before we dive into the agenda today, how are you? How are you doing? You would be amazed at what you find out. You may hear someone say, oh, you know what? Oh my gosh, Bobby just won a soccer game last night and they're going to the state championship. Cool. Now you know about her, you know about Bobby, and you can follow up with her, later on and ask how Bobby did, right? You might hear someone say, you know what? It was a really tough morning. I got a call. I found out my mom's in the hospital. She's, 3 states away. And so I'm going through it right now. You might find out that, right? You might find out something work related. Someone might say, you know what? Honestly, I'm really stressed with the new VP that we've got coming in, and I'm just not sure what that means for our team or how things are going to go. And those are things that people might not proactively have chosen to share with you in that space or place because they might not think that you want to have that conversation or that you're open to it. So that can really be a game changer, is just asking how are you doing? And leave it at that, leave an open door, right? So that would be kind of the individual level. From a communication perspective, there's a framework called DISC. Katy mentioned it earlier, DISC. And so there are DISC assessments and just kind of overviews available for you to help your team get to know and understand that we don't all communicate the same way. And understanding a little bit of the why we communicate the way that we do. And then the generational frameworks. And the generational frameworks are something that, I have been across the country. That's something I do with teams on a just purely complementary basis, is give you a walkthrough of understanding each of the generations and their motivators and drivers. So we had a QR code. It's not up on the screen, but if you want to come see me afterwards, I'm happy to connect.
And one thing I think is really cool that Jenna does is reverse mentoring. So Gen Z is mentoring some of the older, like who doesn't need a Gen Z in their life? I mean, I have some daughters too, but I think that is such a neat idea. And it also helps build respect for each other and where our strengths are and where our weaknesses are, and that we are all different and we have those. Because I think a lot of times it's like, oh, they're lazy or they don't want to do this. You know, all the different perspectives we have around generational differences. It's really fun, and I think it's such a neat, creative way to kind of build that camaraderie and respect for each other. So that's one thing she does do as well.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So Jan, this one's for you. You come from the accounting world, the background. So how can business leaders use data, you love data, to empower their teams and drive results while keeping the human side of decision-making in focus?
Yeah, definitely. Well, first of all, I want to point out, I know Katy said fun and data in the same sentence at least once, but maybe more than that. So it is fun. And what I want to just really kind of bring together in terms of leveraging data is pointing out, as a leader, that personal accountability, it starts with you. It's a choice. It's a choice if you want to rise above your circumstances, and data is a key way to really understand where you're at, help define where you want to be, and then help navigate on how to get there. And so making data transparent and accessible is very important. And I also want to point out, if you are a leader that is leading, if your company has hundreds of employees or thousands of employees, that is applicable. If you're a solopreneur, this is applicable as well. That self-leadership, that personal accountability, and choosing how you're going to do that is definitely coming into play. So being able to do that by setting clear, measurable goals and measuring the results along the way, that allows you to take a step forward and get results. You can't move forward. You need to get a result to improve a result. And so keep taking those steps, understand how it's impacting your results, and then adjust. And it's not about hitting yourself over the head or being super hard on yourself because you have a goal that is a goal that is very something that's way out there. Just be gentle on yourself, step forward, and keep moving forward in the direction. And when you can do that, set milestones, you can celebrate along the way. That's the best part. And so when Katy talks about fun, that's the often fun part, is because you can celebrate those wins. Even if you're still working towards those next steps, you need to pause and celebrate those wins along the way, and just take an approach of influencing others in a balanced way. And so in my book, I talk about, I have to put it in the form of an equation, so sorry, the geek side of me puts it that way, but it's a leadership intelligence equation. So I call it the LQ equation. When we come into a role and we're leading people, we're trying to achieve goals, we have our IQ, we're stepping forward, we have knowledge or expertise that we bring to the table. So we start with our IQ, and then we want to add EQ, and that's a lot about what Jenna and Katy were talking about, having that EQ. So you have your IQ plus your EQ, and then you also need to bring in your FQ, your financial intelligence, your knowledge about numbers, know the story that the numbers are telling you, and combine it together. And that's going to up-level your leadership. That equals your LQ equation.
Okay, I've got one more question, and then we're going to open it up. But Katy, this is for you, and I think almost all of the women in this room have asked themselves this question, so I saved it for last. But being a female leader in we call it a male-populated environment.
Yeah, I remember. I
We don't say
so
male-dominated
much. Yes,
because
there you go.
who's dominating this room? So As a female leader in a very male-populated industry, how have you navigated staying true to yourself and your values, as well as continuing to have influence at the table?
Yeah. So I think all of what we've talked about today is kind of growing myself, knowing myself. You know what that also does is build your confidence, right? And experience does that. But what I learned is really embracing who I am. I got laughed at all the time at the banks, obviously, so I good with that. I think
it's the waddle.
Being okay with being vulnerable and knowing that it's okay to be who I am in my industry. Y'all, this didn't happen like overnight. So I'm going to tell you this, but being true to yourself and holding strong in my values, it took time. But what I realized is that I'm literally going to say this and y'all can laugh too. I'm a gift to this industry. My perspective is so different than so many in these industries that I serve that people don't expect me to do what I'm going to do. Or they're like, you can't be nice and grow a successful business, or you can't respect people and, I don't know, build on relationships and be successful. So at least from my perspective in the industries I've been in, it was so different. And even meeting my customers, but like the truck driver story I told you where we had a driver and I was able to meet him on the delivery site and I was just like, thank you so much for what you do. I'm like, you are so important to my company and I really appreciate all you've done. He started crying. He said he'd never been thanked. And then I gave him a breakfast burrito and he was like, it's not even from McDonald's. He was like, this is real. So anyway, just staying true to myself and holding on to those pieces that make me me. I think in the beginning, it was hard. Like, I'll be honest, like I'm trying to change myself or be tougher or say the right things or act in the right way or not act offended with certain things. But just holding true over time and just believing that my values do matter and that people will respect. And I built these businesses on building relationships. I'm like, if I can help enough people be successful, we're going to be successful. And I just held true to that belief inside of me, knowing that. And like I said, it wasn't always easy. And there was a lot of times, I think being able to I used to tell my kids I was so not cool, I was cool. So I kind of didn't get offended by some of the things that got thrown out at me. And I think you have to hold your boundaries. And one other thing I will say is knowing and growing myself, but understanding, like you guys, I don't know if any of you have ever heard of Rachel Hollis. I think she's a millennial. Anyway, her books, what is it? Girl, Wash Your Face and Stop Apologizing. Girl, Stop Apologizing. Just the understanding of who you are, what you bring to the table, but I don't know, just being you is what's different. Like, and the world will appreciate it, and you're here for a reason. You're in your place for a reason. But that's what I was going to say. Sorry, lost that train of thought. Influence. Like, you can Google whatever you need to know. So if you guys want to understand how to go to a table and sit and talk with them, like the things Jenna and Jan are talking about, knowing people, knowing their personality styles, knowing their body language and how they act, you can respond to that. It's called influence. And Dr. Cialdini is an expert. And if you read his book, you will understand how to use words that influence people, right? So you can empower yourself to be better in those conversations, in those rooms where you are the minority and where you feel intimidated. You can learn things that will help kind of move you forward. So,
did you hear what she said? I am a gift to this industry. You are all, everyone. If there's one thing you get from this conference, we should have buttons printed. Carrie, that's got to be a button for next year. Everyone should be wearing a sticker or something that says, I am a gift to this industry. That was very powerful.
Thank you. No, you guys, it took me so long. I've been apologizing for being successful for so long. It took me so long to be okay with, well, number one, what does it say? She's owner of 2 7-figure businesses. Always try to hide my success. Always try to downplay who I am. And I feel like women, we need to come together and lift each other up. But talk about it. Talk about what you're good at. Talk about and I feel like Gen Z and some of the younger generations are really good at standing up for themselves and telling you, like, this is what I'm good at, or this is what I want, or I want more money. Like, I love that about them. Like, I would never do that. Like, you're like, oh my God, did you just say that? Like, so anyway, that's taken time to get there too, but I know you had something to say.
And I was just going to add, you've been doing the hard work that, the leadership culture is just now catching up to your leadership style because, in terms of, there are 3 factors now that, the world of the people of leadership, say that, you need to have in order to be a successful leader. And the number 1 is authenticity. It is the ability to be yourself.
Personal issue. I'm not the president for our driver advisory board, and I'm like you, like leadership follows me. I don't go for it, so I'm having to learn how. Like this is even different for me right now, standing up, but it's helping me. So I think that I feel like I've been using the wrong word, and I see that it's accountability. So with accountability, is that when the communication gets better?
Yes, I would say yes. Well, one, you're not just throwing things out there.
Oh, I don't know if y'all heard that, but with accountability, does the communication get better? That was your, okay.
And I just jumped right in.
No,
I
that's,
said I'm an I.
That's fine.
Yeah, I what it is in male populated fields, I feel like sometimes we have to almost, what's the word? Almost be extra, like really show up, right? Because, so I think the accountability and the data that Jan's talking about, it just like, if you have that behind you, you're not just speaking from emotion. So they're taking you serious because you can back it with these numbers or with the reasons and the data behind what you're trying to sell them on, right? And then I'm telling you, after Come Up and See Me, I have like so many books and resources that I've used, but the whole like influence and the words you use and how they work, and Power Up, Power Down's another great book that it's about body language and how to be strong and take up space, which she was talking about this morning as well. So yes, I do think it's very important. And surrounding yourself with people who support you and lift you up, whether it's at work, if you don't have that, find it. We met each other in one of these groups that are like empowered living. Like we empower each other to be our best selves. Yeah. So.
Everybody's always like, you can do it. I'm like, what? Like, okay.
Just remember, you are a gift to the industry. You are a gift.
Not just in the, I know, like, we're talking about, like, women in trucking, but just as a whole, because I see, like, it's like, I think with the end in mind. So I'm trying to just incorporate and help
Others see that.
Lift up others, yeah.
I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. Thank you.
Awesome, great question. Any other questions? Do you see any hands?
Right here, yeah.
Go ahead.
Hello.
Imposter syndrome, she said. How many of you, first of all, imposter syndrome is when you're sitting at the table and you feel like everyone thinks you don't know what you're talking about, right?
Or you don't belong, or.
Yeah, we've all had it at some point, but who wants to jump in on that, ladies?
I get every day, just so you know, it doesn't go away. Like I was listening, no, you guys, you can laugh at me. Rachel Hollis, I just told you, girl, stop apologizing. I had that playing last night, literally, because I need that voice to tell me. And Jan was just saying this about her book. She's a best-selling author, and she's like, I don't feel like it. And I think you have to keep, I tell my daughter, I'm like, you have the devil and the angel, right? Like, shut the devil up. And if it talks, turn the music up, find a friend, do whatever you need to do to shut it up and not listen to it, because it's real. And I really, you can get better at controlling it and kind of calling it out. But you guys can talk a lot into that, I'm sure, too.
Yeah, I was going to say, one strategy and kind of one phrase that I've really kind of latched onto is absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. It's Price Pritchard. And basically what that says is, just because I can't see something, just because I can't point to a result, doesn't mean it's not happening, doesn't mean it's not within me, doesn't mean I haven't done it or I can't do it. And so, really kind of keeping that, evidence log or, the ability to kind of really track, what have I done? What have I done that's gotten me to this place in space and this table? Maybe I've never been sitting at this table before, but everything I've done in the past has gotten me here. So really recognizing, hey, what are the things that I've accomplished and achieved? And doing that on a regular basis. In fact, I do this, I work with my clients, I have a weekly debrief at the end of every single week. It's what did I accomplish this week? And those accomplishments are not just the tangibles, but making a difficult decision, building a new relationship, right? Those can be accomplishments. What did I accomplish this week? What lessons did I learn this week? What are my top 3 priorities for the week ahead at the end of every single week? But I share that to say, when imposter syndrome is kicking in, oftentimes recognizing what have I accomplished and using that as the foundation to be able to kind of step forward.
And remember, you're a gift. I think I'm going to get a tattoo.
You are a gift.
I am a gift to this.
And I can just
I
add
think we
one
should
thing.
all get tattoos.
Let's do it tonight, ladies.
I am a
And one
gift to
more
this
thing
industry.
that just came to mind when I was listening to you and I listened to your question. We feel like, because in our world, like we feel like we need to fit inside a box, right? We go through school and we go from grade to grade because we learn what to think. But to be a good leader and from a personal growth standpoint, I've learned my best gift to myself is to really lean into, it's not about what to think, it's about how to think. And it took me a long time. It was even just maybe 4 or 5 years ago, I really started leaning into believing that I am creative. I didn't believe I was creative. I'm like, what? I'm a numbers person. I don't do art or crafts or, that's not my gig. But somebody told me, Jan, no, you're creative. You think outside the box and you solve problems. And when you think outside the box, that doesn't mean that you're doing something the way somebody has already done it or the way somebody thinks you should do it. You are creative. You are solving problems and you're blazing new trails. And that is something that is a huge asset. And so I believe in you, and we all believe in you. We believe in all of
And
you.
girl, I'll give you my card. And when you have that thought, just text me and I'll be like, we're not having it. We're not having it. You just keep moving forward. And another quote that I love is action cures fear. Every day long. I mean, man, do we overthink things. Like, you'll talk yourself out of it a million times, right? But if you just do the act, there's no room for it, right? You don't have time for that nonsense. So keep moving forward.
Well, I'm going to wrap it up. Let's give these ladies a round of applause. So remember, you are a gift, remember that, and I want all of you to bring your gift selves to the celebration, which starts at 6 o'clock. It's called Hooray for Hollywood Reception, and it's in the main area, and we're going to have lots of fun. And they're going to stay up here for a few minutes if you have some questions.
You'd love to chat. Oh, I brought you something too.
Oh, you're kidding. You guys are awesome. Oh my gosh, thank you.
You're welcome.
If I could